At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Merideth and Craig Bennett. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So
Great.
happy to be here.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. And as I have so often shared with other folks, I don't like doing a formal introduction because I think it's more important for you to share your story with the audience and definitely less boring. So if you don't mind, I'd love for you to kind of share your story and how on earth did you get to this point of doing what you're doing?
It's a great question. It's an interesting story.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because we talk all the time about, we're going to tell the story here in a second, but had we planned this story ahead of time, it never would have ever turned out this way. But when you look back, you're like, oh, I can connect the dots to how we got here, but you never would have been able to plan all that out to get to this point. So yeah, we're former corporate employees, 9 to 5. We met at the same company. We worked for the same company. That's where we met. And during the pandemic, companies were deciding what they were doing and everything was in turmoil, and our company was no different. And they decided that they were going to close the office that we were both working in, and they wanted to relocate us further away from back out west, further away from all our family and friends. And so they said, if you want to move back out west, you have a job. And if you don't, then you're going to have to find other arrangements for yourself.
Kind of a bye-bye, huh?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And so we really had a decision on our hands. And initially that was a really difficult decision for us because we were very much grew up with the mentality of, you go to school, you get good grades, you graduate, you go to school again, you get good grades, and then you graduate, you get a good job, and you save for retirement, and you have the corporate job, you climb the ladder, all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that was the life plan that we were on. And it was a kick in the stomach when that, was almost like, I guess we were forced to make a decision whether we wanted to continue that further away and be unhappy, potentially unhappy, I guess. We were already a little bit unfulfilled in our roles. And so, yeah, go ahead.
And so it's interesting because we were on that sort of default life plan that we'd learned growing up, and we were checking all those boxes, right? Like by all of society's milestones and measures, we were successful. But to Craig's point, inside we weren't feeling super fulfilled in those corporate roles. And then when this opportunity came up, it was a very stressful decision. We didn't really know what we should do. And at that same time, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and it had spread, and we thought it was going to be his last Christmas. And so we drove home 17 hours to be with my family for Christmas that year. And on that 17-hour drive back to where we lived, we made the decision that we were not going to move west and move farther away from our family because, we were given the gift of perspective with my dad's sickness, and that really helped us make the decision. Like, our parents weren't getting any younger, and his grandmother certainly not getting any younger. And when we move out west, we're going to see a lot less of them. And so it really gave us the perspective we needed to make what was a very difficult decision. And I can remember we were walking around our neighborhood after we had decided, and we're both very plan-oriented people. Like we like to have a checklist and work our way through a plan when we're trying to figure something out. And even though we didn't have a plan of what we were going to do next, it just felt like the right decision inside to leave the company. Even though we didn't know what we were going to do, even though it was very scary, there was something almost peaceful about the decision that it just felt like the right thing. And interestingly enough, after we made that decision, my dad got diagnosed with second cancer, which was actually good news. And he got treated for both of his cancers. And for the next almost 4 years was very healthy. And so we got those 4 years with my dad because we moved home, and he passed a couple of weeks ago. But it was a gift to get those last few years with him. So it's interesting when you look back how that all worked out for us.
It's amazing sometimes how serendipitous life can be. And obviously we can attribute that to a higher power.
Very much.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because it was one of the biggest lessons I took from that part of our journey was that intuition, listening to your gut. Even though, like she said, we're very planful people, we like to have our ducks in a row before we execute on something, and that's, ingrained in us since we were kids and fortified through our corporate world, our corporate jobs. But going through this journey, it really unearthed in me this power of my intuition and starting to listen to it more and trusting that if you follow your gut, you follow your happiness, everything else just starts to click into place. It just starts to align for you. And so that was a really big lesson I took out of this part of the journey for sure.
And what type of business were you in? I mean, you probably had different roles, but what were you doing? It sounds like you both had master's degrees, or at least close to that. But what were you doing?
We were working for an energy company, and so I was working in the inclusion and diversity group within HR, and he was working in health and safety.
All right, so how on earth did you get to where you are now? And what were the experiences and so forth that brought you to the point where you felt like you had the ability and the background to teach what you're teaching?
Well, we actually started, like we said, we had zero plan. And so we started doing some research, and it seemed like most people that were jumping into entrepreneurship at that time were jumping into real estate. And so we jumped into real estate investing, trying to replace our corporate income. So we started a business, we hired a business coach, we got a website, we did the marketing, we invested a bunch of money to do all of the things. And as we started trying to build that business, we realized that we were miserable, like absolutely hated what we were doing. And it was starting to bleed into our relationship, which had historically been very, very strong.
Yeah, it was a strength for me, our relationship has always been the foundation for everything else. Like it's always been a strength. And when we started this real estate investing company and we started becoming miserable and a little bit snippy with each other, and like there was a little bit of friction between us, which is not normally there, that's when it was like, okay, time out. This is not good. This is a non-starter for us. We have to have a conversation. What are we doing here? And we were really unhappy because like it wasn't fulfilling to us. It was similar to the corporate world we had just left, except we just weren't making the corporate salaries that we had just left behind. So it was even worse, really. And so we just said, we had a hard discussion and said, look, this is not working for us. We need to pivot. And what we realized was we didn't do the work at the front end when we left our corporate jobs to understand, because we're embarking on this whole new life for ourselves.
Yeah.
What is it that we actually want? What are we going after? And who do we want to become in the process? Like, who do we want to be in this world? We didn't do that work at all. And so we just jumped in willy-nilly into like chasing income, which is never the right move. And what we realized was this is what needs to happen. So when we closed up shop, we put that company to bed. We called that money that we invested
investment
payment for a lesson learned.
Yes.
And we embarked on a journey of personal growth and understanding what it is that we want this world to be for us, of what we want out of this world, who we want to be in this world, what we want to give back to this world. And so that was the journey we went on for the next, I don't know, what was
couple
it?
of years. But we closed that business and spent the next 6 weeks traveling around the southwestern US. We went to a couple of conferences. We went hiking in Zion National Park. We just kind of gave ourselves permission to just be ourselves and decide who we want to be so we could figure out what we want to do. And it's little wonder the first business failed, since we had no idea what any of those answers were at that point. So it's like, of course, in hindsight, that business failed. We didn't know the kind of life we wanted to live. So how are we going to build a business to support that? And so we spent the next couple of years really trying not to focus on the income, but trying to focus on us, who we were becoming, what we wanted our life to be like. And in that process, we were attending various conferences and retreats and seminars and things like that. And people kept coming up to us and asking like, hey, you're doing this together. It's very cool. You seem to have a very strong relationship. What's your secret? How do you do it? What do you do that makes you so connected? And so we would, have those conversations because they were really fun for us. But it wasn't until at one of these events, one of the people hosting the event said, I'd like you to speak on stage at my next event about relationships. And that's when we said, maybe that we do have something to offer in this space more than just these ad hoc conversations all over the place. And it was almost a validation that we needed, that we do have something valuable to offer. And because of that request, we had to sort of take a step back and almost codify how we do relationships. And that was the first step, I would say, into this space that we're in now.
Isn't it interesting that, we go through college, for those that do, or whatever it is that we're doing, and we get that degree and we're out there working, and yeah, we can be successful at that. And yet what really comes out is those life experiences. And at some point in time, those life experiences help us to develop an entirely different approach.
Completely.
100%.
Like 180-degree difference.
So now you're just really helping marriages. You're helping folks in marriages, relationships to do what?
Strengthen their relationships, reconnect, bring fun and joy back to their marriage so that they can build their dream life together, because it's our superpower. We've leveraged our relationship to build our dream life, and we're still building it, obviously, but it's when you have a relationship that is basically, you're not spending all your time fixing problems, but you're just maintaining the relationship. It requires so much less effort, which frees up all that energy to build your dream, to focus on the things that matter in your life. And not only just do you have that energy, but you've got someone else with that energy, and it's exponential. So you've got an exponential force that's now building towards something greater. And it's just a really cool,
it's a cheat code.
It's a cheat code for life. And that's what we help people with.
Yeah. And you have that quote on your website, a thriving marriage is the cheat code for leveling up every other area of your life. So here comes the question to my mind. Research is showing that marriages are diminishing. In other words, our younger generations are not getting married. They're preferring to be single and that type of thing. Have you found, and is it your experience, that literally marriage is a better situation to be in if, in fact, it's a healthy one? And as you say, does a thriving marriage really level up every other area in your life versus just being single?
Yes, that's my experience, because I was single for a decade before I met him. And it's a complete transformation in how my life feels and what I'm working toward, and the support that I have to know that you've got someone on the same team, rowing in the same direction, like locked arms with you, walking up this mountain together. It just the peace of mind that you get, that you're not in it by yourself. It's a game changer. It was a complete game changer for me.
Interesting. So, another question that comes to my mind, and we always talk about, here we are in this situation, how do we repair our marriages? What advice would you give our young people, or even older people that are still single, that are thinking of getting married? What advice would you give them when they're developing that relationship to make sure that that marriage is going to be more on a positive note than potentially negative note? Because there's so many people that rush into it, get married, thinking that, okay, here's who I'm marrying. And within a year's time or less, all of a sudden they married someone who was literally an imposter, or they themselves were living an imposter's life, and the other person realized that too. So do you ever work with single individuals who are thinking of getting married or getting into that relationship? And what are some of the things that they really need to look for and do?
In terms of what they need to do,
Yeah.
for me, the number one is they need to be themselves. They need to not be who they think the other person wants them to be. And so one small example of this for us early on, it's funny, it's a simple thing, but to me, it was a big aha moment, that when we were getting to know each other, he was asking me, do I like Star Wars? And in my experience, most guys seem to like Star Wars. Again, all the TV shows and movies make it seem like all the dudes love Star Wars. I'm not a giant Star Wars fan, so I wasn't sure how to answer the question. Do I say yes and just suffer through all the Star Wars movies with him because, that's what you do? Or do I actually show up as who I am and he can decide if that's, an important thing or not? And so I hesitated with how to answer that question. And then I decided to be brave and to be myself and answer it honestly and said, you know what, Star Wars is not really my jam. And he's like, me neither, which was not the answer I was expecting. But, had I not shown up as myself and given him a dishonest answer, part of our very beginning foundation would have been built on not true to me and inauthenticity for me. And so that's just a very, small, minor example, but you can see how those things easily pile on when you're trying to be the, I really liked this guy. I wanted him to like me. So you want to be the person that is going to be accepted. And I think that's also just human nature. One of our deep intrinsic desires is to belong. And sometimes we get a little confused in that and we show up as who we think will be accepted and feel a sense of belonging. And when we do that, what we're actually doing is fitting in to a group or into a relationship. And when we fit in, the person who's receiving that love is actually not us. It is the person we're pretending to be. And so even if he were to love me as this Star Wars loving human, I'm not going to receive that love and I'm not going to feel worthy of that love because I know he's putting that love on someone who likes Star Wars, not actually on me. And so I think the most important thing to do when you're starting a relationship is to be yourself. And even as we progress through a longer term relationship, a longer term marriage, usually the number one reason we find disconnect and distance in a marriage is we're not letting each other in. We're not being honest with each other. We're trying to protect the other from the stress and what's keeping you up at night. And, you think you're helping by not putting that stress on the other person, but the other person can feel that there's something going on and that you're not sharing it. So as humans, we're meaning-making machines too. We make stories up. You're going to make up a story about why I'm not sharing that. And I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart to try and protect you, but that's creating a distance between us. And so it's that willingness to be brave and be vulnerable and be uncomfortable and share the things that, maybe you're a bit worried that the other person isn't going to like in you, but showing up as your authentic self is literally the only way to build a strong relationship and be able to feel love from another human.
Well, and you mentioned that you went through some personal development and you both decided to do that. What type of process was that for you?
So it was really, we didn't really have a plan for it. It was really just kind of a shotgun approach almost. Like we didn't really, other than we knew that we needed to know what it was that we wanted our life to be like. So we needed to do some of that work. But one of the things we eventually discovered on this process was just going to conferences, reading books, listening to podcasts, and the things that resonated for us, we pull on that a little bit more. And one of the things that really came up for me in particular was learning about myself, understanding who I am. And I think that would be my answer to your previous question, would be not just be who you are, but actually do the work to understand who that person is and then stay true to that person. Because I think staying true to that person is one thing, but if you don't know who that is, then that's really tough to do. So I think the first step is one step further beyond that is like, do the inner work, do the personal growth, read the books, listen to the podcast, go to the personal growth events and learn about who you are and what makes you you. What are your values? What do you want to be seen in this? How do you want to be seen in this world? Who do you want to become in this world? What do you want to give to this world? What is your gift? And what do you want to be known for? And do all of those things and understand that about yourself and then never let that go. And it'll evolve and it'll grow as you grow, but never compromise those things about yourself. And so that was the journey that we went on.
And in the spirit of full disclosure, we almost stumbled backwards into personal growth in the beginning because we went to a real estate conference that we thought was like just a regular run-of-the-mill real estate conference that really had a lot of personal growth to it. And then we were part of a real estate mastermind that had a lot of personal growth. So we didn't in the beginning seek out the personal growth so much as seek out the real estate information. And with that came back the personal growth. And once we sort of got a taste for that, then to his point, we started pulling on those threads.
It's really funny when you go on this journey of entrepreneurship and figuring out kind of a different way than maybe how you grew up to live your life. It's funny how things line up for you. We talked about like you can't connect the dots looking backwards, or sorry, looking forwards, but you definitely can looking backwards. And personal growth and the amount of work required on yourself was something that I did not understand that was going to be the biggest part of this journey. I thought it was going to be, oh, you're just going to create a business and make some money and go on and do your thing. But your business and what you end up creating in this world is going to be limited as far as what you're able to as a person are able to do. And so you really need to work on yourself, get yourself to a higher level so that you can then bring all your business and everyone else around you to a higher level.
Well, and when you talk about personal growth, and again, as we talk about people that are in relationships right now, marriages, we talk about people who are considering it. How important is it that both parties are really open to and willing to go through that personal growth? Because as you say, this is not, I'm going to do this tomorrow and be done. I mean, I've been doing this for years and years and years and years, and still I'm not even where I want to be. And I look at that and I think, you know what happens if you're in a relationship where the other person isn't willing to do that?
It's huge, because let's think about it for a second. Like if you're growing and the other person isn't, you're literally growing apart. You're literally growing apart. If one person is becoming a different person, they're growing and becoming the best version of them, and the other person kind of stays where they're at, there's a distance that's growing between you. But if you both grow and become the people you're supposed to be, you grow together. And so I think it's critical in a relationship. And we've seen it in this entrepreneurial world as we've joined different masterminds and different groups and all our peers. And there's a very, very big difference between the entrepreneurs that are going on this journey with their spouse and how they're growing, and those that are doing it on their own and their spouse has no interest in that side of it. And the difference in the quality of those relationships that we see firsthand.
Well, and in your case, you kind of both have decided to do things together. I mean, that's kind of the impression I get. But how do you help couples that are very individual, very independent? One person may really have a love for XYZ, whereas the other person really has a love for ABC. How do you help them to find that commonality and really develop that strength? And obviously with the personal development, it may be that, okay, this is what I really love, and no, this is what I really love. How do you help them to get to the point where they are literally connecting in a way that still allows them each to maintain that individuality and accomplish the things that are important to them?
Yeah, I think it's a both and. I think for your relationship, it's really important that you feel fulfilled and you do the things that fill you up, fill your cup, make you, enjoy life. So if you love ABC and your partner loves XYZ, that's okay. You both need to go and do those things separately. If the other, you can also bring the other one along or join the other one and what they do. If that works, if it doesn't, that's okay. You need to do the things that you love to do, even if that's separately. And you need to find something that you can both enjoy doing together, because it's important that you both feel fulfilled and your cup is full and you have a strong sense of self and do the things that you love to do. That's important for you as a person so that you can bring the best version of you into your relationship. And you also need to find that dedicated quality time together to do the things that you enjoy doing, something together, some way to have fun and I feel a sense of adventure together. And back to the personal growth, it's especially with entrepreneurs when there's only one person, in that entrepreneurial space and the other one is corporate, because that is the biggest difference I have found between the corporate existence and the entrepreneurial existence. Is my corporate success wasn't limited by my level of personal growth and development, but my entrepreneurial success is limited by my level of personal growth and development. So if you've got one corporate and one entrepreneur, the corporate one is probably going to be less invested in the personal growth, but they still have to be open to it. They still have to be willing to come along and do the work. They don't have to be the driver of it, but they have to be open and willing. Otherwise, to Craig's point, you get that big distance.
So how does an individual, and I think, this is an important point, at least in my mind. You had talked a little bit about really being who you are, true to yourself. And if you're not, that energy kind of gets fed over to Craig, and he's sensing, and based on his perception, he's creating a story on that. How do you help people to understand that not only am I heading this direction and you're heading that direction, but how do you help them to understand that they are supportive, and that literally, if you two had different things you wanted to do, Craig was really supporting you, although he was going his way, he was really supporting you, and vice versa. And how important is that?
It's critical. Like when you join forces with someone, you're their teammate, but you're also their biggest cheerleader. And so there are times where you're going to be their teammate and you're joining forces. Like we do a lot of things together. We're on the same team. We do that. But sometimes we go on solo missions. Like life is a solo journey, if we're being honest. Like you come into this world alone and likely are going to die alone. Like you are the one relationship you have from start to finish. And so you need to maintain that relationship and be okay with that relationship. And so when you go on that journey and you go and run a marathon by yourself because that's something you like to do, but your partner does not want to do that, then your partner is there to cheer you on and say, hey, congratulations. How can I support you? What can I do to help you? Like, it's just being the person there to help them achieve their goals. You don't necessarily have to
run the race with them.
Do it with them, but maybe you clap and cheer them on when they cross the finish line.
And you know what, at least in my experience, that is so essential, that you're doing that personal development work so that you have the ability to be present and to recognize that, I'm going to support them because I love them. This is important to them. And in no way am I feeling jealous or ignored or any of those things. One of the interesting things that I've come across as I've interviewed so many people, as we get into, psychological things and all these type of things, relationships, is there's always kind of that tendency to talk about what isn't working. And to be fair with the professionals that have gone to college, that have those degrees, that are in there doing marriage counseling or whatever counseling they're doing, there are those that are just so excellent and they figured it out. But there's also that situation where the traditional counseling, the traditional coaching doesn't work. And what has been your experience with that? And I know that you talk about 5 different categories where it's not working.
So things like, we're talking broken trust and emotional disconnection, those types of things.
Right.
I think it's critical that when I'll let you go. I gotta get my thoughts together. Go ahead.
And there's the value of a marriage relationship.
That's right. Yeah, I'm gonna let her take this one. I want to get my thoughts together.
That's right. I think we're all shaped by our past, right? We all bring our experiences of the world, the experiences that we've had into our marriage, of course, but into every relationship that we're in. And we see the world through the lens of our experience. And one thing I've had to come to grips with is there is no objective reality. There is no one universal truth, because every situation that everyone experiences is experienced through the lens of their life to this point. And so there's a lot of value in understanding what that experience has been for you and how it's shaping your life today. There's less value in living in the past and re-experiencing all of that. You need to understand how the past has shaped you today and how you can change those stories that you have, because we all tell stories like we talked about before. We're humans, we make up stories when we don't necessarily know the full scope of the facts. But especially as kids, because as kids, we don't really understand life yet. And so when things happen to us as kids, we tell stories, and that story almost becomes truth in our brain. And we bring that truth into our marriage. And so everything we experience day to day, we experience through the filter of that story, of that truth that we have. And so that's why, I can get triggered by him not taking the garbage out because of my past experience of, I don't have a good explanation for that one, but we can sometimes, something can happen in the present that takes us back to a feeling we've had a long time ago because it triggers that feeling in us. And it's important that we trace that and understand why we're feeling that so we can reprogram that story. Great example of this is we were hiking in Arizona and he was hustling down the mountain. He's a billy goat. He's very sure-footed on the mountain. I'm not quite so fast. And so he's kind of jogging down the mountain and I'm having a hard time keeping up and I'm getting really frustrated, really annoyed with him. And why won't he turn around? Does he not know I'm not right there? Why won't he wait for me? And so I'm getting really annoyed. And so then I'm taking a deep breath, like, logically, I know he's not going to run down the mountain, hop in the car, drive away and leave me here. Like I know for a fact that won't happen. So why am I so upset with him in this moment? And I gave myself some quiet time to trace that feeling. And I had this sudden realization that I actually have a fear of abandonment buried deep inside from my past experiences. So I'm seeing this situation today through the lens of my fear of abandonment. And now I'm angry with him that he's abandoning me on this mountain, even though he's not. And so then fast forward a few days, I have to share with him that I have this fear of abandonment so that he knows that I have that. And going forward, we can, work on that together. He can try to not abandon me and trigger that abandonment feeling on the mountain. And I can try not to feel that trigger of abandonment. So we both have an accountability there. The point of the story being he was not abandoning me on the mountain, but that's how I was feeling in that moment because I was experiencing that situation through the lens of an old story. And so those old stories, those old experiences are valuable from the perspective of how are they shaping my experience with him today? And how can I change that story, that narrative in my head so that the next time we're going down a mountain, I don't feel abandoned by him because that's my accountability. And I feel like historically a lot of marriage counseling spends a lot of time in the situations that created those stories, where we don't spend as much time in the situations that created those stories as much as we do in the awareness of those stories and then retelling, reprogramming those stories so that going forward, I don't feel abandoned coming down the mountain.
And that I think that's so true. What you said, it's interesting. I meditate. I try to meditate every day, and I do a walking meditation for an hour. And one of the affirmations that I do while I'm there is I basically speak out loud to myself that those subconscious triggers in my mind, in the subconscious, in my soul, no longer affect my emotions or my behavior. And it's interesting that, as you say, they're there, they exist, they come up. But to be able to get to the point of mindset and consciousness to where when they come up, you look at them and you go, okay, that's really a past experience that is not necessarily reality here and now. And so you're able to put that aside. And I love the fact that, as you talk about, so many times people keep focusing so much on that past rather than looking at the past, recognizing when those triggers are coming up, and then recognizing that that's all they are and that they do not have to affect our emotion and they don't have to affect our behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to live there. We don't want to live in the past. Happiness is in the now. We want to live in the now. We just want to go back to get through the issue and learn the lesson and take the good from it so that we can enjoy the past and build for the future. And that's what coaching does that sometimes I think therapy maybe misses the mark on a little bit. It's more living in the past and dealing with that and dredging up that a little bit more and sitting in it a little bit more than maybe that we would like to do.
Yeah,
So
it's equipping. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the key strategies that you use as you're working with couples?
one of the key strategies, two of my favorite strategies, actually, they're both around communication. And the first one is what we call a connection conversation. It's basically the letting them in conversation. It's going back to what we talked about earlier, when we don't share what's keeping us up at night, what we're afraid of, what's stressing us out, what our dreams and our goals are. When we don't share that stuff with our partner, they start to make up stories, and then those stories get triggered. And so when you can, on a regular basis, we like to do this weekly, when you can weekly have that conversation kind of at the end of a week, let's download what was good about this week, where did I struggle this week, what's keeping me up at night, what am I afraid of, and really let your partner in on what's going on in your head. Then you can start the next week sort of really aligned and on the same page, and not feel like you've got a distance growing between you, but you feel really aligned at the end of every week and to start the next week. So that's my favorite connection building tool. And then from a connection sort of maintaining perspective, I love the check-in question. So every night as we're kind of laying our heads down to go to bed, we'll usually ask a very specific question. This doesn't work if you say, how was your day? Because how was your day is going to probably get you a fine, like a very generic answer, or it's going to get you a complete debrief download on the entire, every single detail of every single event of the whole day. When you ask a really specific question of like, what was the best part of your day today? Or what was your favorite lesson you learned today? Or, something really specific, you'll get a really specific answer that you will actually learn something about your partner. And especially when you've been together a long time, it feels like sometimes you don't always learn new things about your partner all the time. But if you can ask really good questions, you're going to learn, it's going to, bring more color to the context of your partner, and it's going to keep you feeling connected, because when you approach that check-in question with a genuine curiosity, your partner feels like you actually care and want to be a part of their day. So they're feeling validated and you're learning about them. So you're building a tighter and tighter connection by doing this daily check-in.
And I think another strategy is going back to what we talked about when we left our corporate job and not knowing who we were. So one of the strategies is, and the relationship you have with yourself is first and foremost the most important relationship you're going to have in life. You have to get that right, because the love that you are able to give is limited by the love you have for yourself. So it's really working on, and let's be honest, there's a worthiness epidemic in the world. Like, most people do not feel worthy of the things that they want in this life. And so one of the strategies is really working on making sure that we change the narrative, the stories, the things that little voice in our head comes up and tells us we're not good enough. We need to address that voice. We need to name that voice, and we need to disassociate from that voice and understand that we're not that voice. We're not those thoughts, and that we are worthy of all those things that we want in life. And there's a very, specific exercises we do to make sure that we, start to address that voice and put that voice in the passenger seat so that we can drive and get to the destination that we actually ultimately want to end up at.
Because when you don't feel worthy of love, when you don't feel worthy of that relationship, you're going to sabotage it anyway. So all the communication tools in the world aren't going to help if you're actually sabotaging your own self.
Right.
And isn't it interesting how we don't feel worthy? There's that whole sense of I'm not good and so forth. In fact, it's interesting. Before we got on this podcast, I was working with an individual who has a couple of young children and has an 8 and 10-year-old son who was asking a number of questions about religion. And he went to his English teacher, because I'm in Thailand, right? And so he went to his English teacher and was asking some things. And the teacher turned around and basically said to him, "You're evil. You were born in sin," and boom, boom, boom. And so, the mother is actually texting me and saying, "What do I do?" And I thought about that, and I thought, how often society, religion, philosophies teach us that we're not good. And yet, how do we help people? I mean, I know how I do it, but how do we help people to understand that, you are not only just good, but basically you are really good. You have that internal, eternal light within you that you just need to recognize is there and start to take away all of those other things that are impinging on that and starting to remove them away so you come to that realization. And Craig, as you said, learning to really love yourself.
Yeah, it's all about changing that narrative because to your point, we learn it in school. Like schools are set up that we're in competition and we're marked with red ink and we get the F and we're not good enough. And I remember going home with a test. I got a 95% on that test. I got a 95%. That's pretty good. And I take it home and out of the goodness of their heart, they're great parents. But my parents would be like, but what happened to the other 5%? And so even from that point, like I got a 95%, I got a really great grade on that test, but the message I took was it wasn't good enough. I have to be perfect. And so they have the best of intentions. It was coming from a place of love. It was them just telling me that I was capable and that they were proud of me and that they knew that I was capable to take on the world and get 100% on this test. But that wasn't how the message landed. And I think that's what a lot of people get as they grow up is that message that they're not good enough, whether it's a test or religion or schools or wherever, sports. It's about changing that narrative. And we have to just be consistent about it because it's been ingrained in us for me, 40 years, and for others, 50, 60, 70 years, 20 years. It depends on how old you are, but chances are it's really deeply ingrained in you. And so it's going to take consistent daily action of really going in and doing that mindfulness and meditating and sitting with those thoughts and really getting curious with them, not judging them, but just getting curious with them and saying, okay, why do I feel this way? Like, and asking yourself some really interesting, curious questions, and then changing that narrative, changing that story, and being consistent with it, and finding stories and things that you can tell yourself that are actually believable, and reminding yourself of all your greatness, reminding yourself of the home run you hit in Little League to win the championship, reminding yourself of the spelling bee that you won, reminding yourself of that time that you came to that kid's defense when the bully was picking on them, reminding yourself of how you've been a good person throughout your life and doing all these amazing things. That's what it's all about, is being consistent about rewriting that narrative of how you are in this world.
Oh, amen to that. And you know what amazes me is time goes by so fast. And I think we could go on for another couple of hours easily, but my manager won't let me do that. So there you go. So as we close, I have a final question that I'd love for you to share with the audience. And that is, what's the number one thing someone can do right now to improve their relationship?
Take 100% accountability for your relationship, whatever it is. If it's your marriage, if it's your business partner, your colleague, your girlfriend, your mother, your sister, whoever it is, take 100% responsibility for the state of that relationship. Because we grew up believing a good marriage is 50-50 and any good relationship is 50-50. 50-50 introduces a gray area. Whose job is that? Who apologizes first? If each of you take 100% responsibility for the state of your marriage, you don't keep score, you don't feel defensive, you don't feel attacked. It creates a 200% marriage where you're each taking that 100% responsibility and you feel like teammates again.
No, I love it. I love it. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show. And like I say, there's so much we haven't even gotten into. Love to have you on the show again if you decide you'd like to do that.
Absolutely.
But meanwhile, I really appreciate your comments, what you've shared. And it's not easy always to share those type of things and to be transparent. So I appreciate that too. And most importantly, you're making a difference, I am convinced, in the lives of many people. And I think that's what's important.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And folks, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to having you join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.